The morning light flooded the veranda of my house in Deerfield Beach, playing on the surface of the cooled coffee in my cup. I sat in a wicker chair, watching the leisurely life of suburbia, 73 years old. Once it had seemed an unimaginably distant age. Now I myself felt its weight on my shoulders daily. Retired, retired judge. Those words defined my present position, but said nothing about how to fill the days that stretched into infinity after Sylvia's departure. 5 years had passed, and I still habitually sought her gaze, turned to share a thought, and stumbled into emptiness. I set the cup aside and looked at the clock, almost 10. Lydia should have been here any minute. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, she helped me with the cleaning, though admittedly in recent years her presence had become much more than just household help. My phone vibrated. Nathan's name on the screen evoked mixed feelings. My only son. We'd once been close, but something had snapped after Sylvia left. He stopped coming over for Sunday lunches. His phone calls became less frequent and his conversations shorter and more formal. "Hi, Daddy." His voice sounded cheerful but distant. "How are you?" "Fine." I cleared my throat. "Did something happen?" "Why does something have to happen?" There was irritation in his tone. "Just calling to see how you're doing." I stayed silent, knowing it wasn't true. Nathan never just called. "Okay," he gave up after a pause. "Jeremy's birthday is Saturday, and he's turning 10. We're having a party at the Ocean Wave Amusement Park. Pamela insists I invite you. That's it. Not his idea, Pamela's." My sister-in-law was always careful to maintain decorum, especially when it might affect their reputation in the eyes of their many important friends. "I'll be there," I said, though my gut told me I wasn't welcome. "What time?" 2 to 5, Nathan answered. "But you don't have to come if you don't want to. I realize it can be tiring." He's looking for a way to talk me out of it, I thought. "I want to see my grandson." My voice sounded firmer than I expected. "I will." There was a pause. "Good," Nathan finally said. "I'll see you Saturday then." The call ended, and I was alone again with the silence of the house and my thoughts. My grandson is 10 years old. I'd seen him only twice in the last year Christmas, and a glimpse of him when Nathan had stopped by to pick up some paperwork. The boy hardly knew me, looking at me with curiosity and apprehension as if he were a stranger. The doorbell interrupted my thoughts. Lydia stood on the doorstep carrying an unchanged bag of cleaning supplies and freshly baked goods in a paper bag. "Good morning, Mr. Kingsley," she smiled, walking into the house. "I brought blueberry muffins. I just baked them." "Lydia, how many times have I asked you to call me Walter?" I smiled back, accepting the package. After 15 years, formalities seemed ridiculous. She only shook her head, heading for the kitchen. Lydia was 60, but she had more energy than I did. Short, with neatly cut graying hair and lively brown eyes, she exuded a quiet confidence. Widowed young, she raised her son alone, and when he went to study abroad, she came to work with me and Sylvia. "How's your blood pressure?" she asked, arranging the muffins on a plate. "Are you taking your pills?" "It's under control," I assured her, though I felt a little dizzy this morning. "Dr. Burns says I'm in great shape for my age." "That's because I'm watching your diet," she said with a slight reproach. While Lydia cleaned up, I returned to the veranda with the newspaper, but my thoughts kept returning to my upcoming birthday. What would I get Jeremy? What would interest a modern 10-year-old boy about whom I knew next to nothing? Once upon a time, I knew all about children's hobbies. When Nathan was little, we spent every weekend together. Fishing, hiking, museums, the planetarium. He asked a million questions, and I enjoyed answering them all. Where's that inquisitive boy who looked at me with admiration? When was he replaced by this cold, calculating man? "Shakunum, what are you thinking about?" Lydia's voice brought me out of my musings. She put fresh coffee on the table and sat down across from me. "Nathan invited me to Jeremy's birthday party," I answered. "Or rather, Pamela insisted on inviting me." Lydia nodded understandingly. She was tactful enough not to comment on my relationship with my son, but I knew she understood. "What should I get a 10-year-old boy?" I asked. "So, I don't even know what he's into." "Kids that age usually like electronics," Lydia suggested. "Maybe a game console?" "He probably already has everything money can buy," I sighed. "Nathan and Pamela are literally flooding him with gifts. The last time I'd been to their house, his room had looked like the toy section of a big box store. Lydia thought for a moment. What if we gave him something special? Something connected to your memories? The thought stuck with me. There was a box of Nathan's things stored in the garage. Among them was an old telescope I'd given him for his 10th birthday. We used to do a lot of stargazing, and I would tell him about the constellations and planets. I have an idea, I said. Can you help me find something in the garage? Lydia nodded, and we headed toward the cluttered garage. Among the boxes and old furniture, we found the box labeled Nathan School Years. The telescope was there, wrapped in an old blanket. I carefully pulled it out, wiping off the dust. It was in good condition, just a little tarnished from time. It's a beautiful gift, Lydia said as she helped me carry the telescope into the house. A real family heirloom. All day long, Lydia and I tidied up the telescope, cleaning the lenses, lubricating the mechanisms. As we worked, I told her about my stargazing with Nathan, how his eyes lit up when he first saw the rings of Saturn. You know, my son Peter loved astronomy too, Lydia said, polishing the telescope barrel. He even enrolled in astrophysics, but then he got interested in programming. Now he works for a company in London, developing programs for the space industry. You must be proud of him, I said. And you see him often? A shadow ran across her face. Not as often as I'd like. He's very busy, and the flights are expensive. We video call every Sunday. I've noticed how similar our situations are, although for different reasons. My son lived only half an hour away, but the emotional distance between us was huge. Maybe you should go visit him. I suggested it. You haven't taken a vacation in a while. Maybe next year, she said evasively. For now, let's think about how to pack this telescope. By evening, the telescope was fully restored and packed in a new box, which Lydia wrapped with festive paper. We sat on the veranda enjoying the sunset and tea. Do you think he'll like it? I asked, nodding at the wrapped gift. If he's anything like you, he will. Lydia smiled. The words warmed my soul, though I knew they were illusory. Jeremy was growing up in a different world, a world of gadgets and instant gratification. He was unlikely to appreciate an old telescope when there were so many bright, flashing, jingling toys around. After Lydia left, I sat alone for a long time, going through old photographs. Nathan at Jeremy's age, telescope in hand, wide smile and disheveled hair. Nathan and Sylvia on a picnic, our family trip to Yellowstone. Each photo is a shard of a happy past that can never be brought back. Somewhere we lost touch. Maybe when I went to work, building a career as a judge. Maybe when Nathan went away to college and came back a different person, ambitious, focused on career and money. Or when he married Pamela, whose idea of success was reduced to status and material possessions. Sylvia's death 5 years ago was the final straw. She had been a link between us, softening our differences, creating occasions for us to meet. With her gone, our relationship had become a formality, maintained only out of inertia and obligation. I put the photographs aside and looked at the packed telescope. Perhaps it was a naive attempt to recover something long lost, but I had no other ideas. In the evening, a text came from Nathan with the address of the amusement park and a request not to be late. Not a word about how excited he was to see me or that Jeremy would be happy to see me, just information, as if I wasn't a father and grandfather, but a business associate. I couldn't sleep for a long time that night. My mind was spinning with thoughts of an upcoming birthday party, a grandson who barely knows me, a son who has become a stranger. I imagined handing Jeremy the telescope, explaining to him that it wasn't just a gift, but part of our family history. I imagined his eyes lighting up with excitement, but deep down inside, I knew that wasn't going to happen. Most likely, my gift would be politely but indifferently thanked and then put aside and forgotten. And I would be left standing on the sidelines, a stranger at the celebration of life that would go on without me. With this bitter thought, I fell at last into a restless sleep, in which I saw Sylvia again and again. She looked at me with a slight sadness and shook her head as if she wanted to say something but could not find the right words. Friday morning greeted me with sunshine and the sound of lawnmowers outside my window. My birthday was one day away, and I had to prepare myself mentally for the ordeal. I wasn't fooling myself. It would be exactly that, a test. A day when I would once again face the reality of my loneliness in the midst of my own family. The Ocean Wave amusement park greeted me with a deafening cacophony of sounds. Children's laughter, the mechanical clanking of carousels, and the haunting melodies of slot machines blended into a chaotic noise that gave me a headache. I clutched the box with the telescope tighter in my hands and headed for the picnic area mentioned in the message. When I got there, I noticed Nathan standing surrounded by several men, gesticulating vigorously. His expensive suit made him stand out, even in this informal setting. Pamela was nearby, leading a team of animators who were decorating the party area with balloons and garlands. "Dad, you made it," Nathan said, and something akin to surprise flickered in his voice. "I thought you'd change your mind." "I promised," I replied, shaking his hand. The formality of that father-son gesture hurt my heart. "What's this?" He nodded at the box in my hands. "A gift for Jeremy." He raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. Instead, he turned and called out to one of the men, "Edward, I'd like you to meet my father, Walter Kingsley." "Dad, this is Edward Sterling, my new business partner." For the next 20 minutes, I was engrossed in small talk with Nathan's business associates. They talked about markets, investments, yachts, and golf clubs. I nodded politely, but I felt like a complete stranger in this society. My gaze roamed the court looking for my grandson. Finally, I spotted Jeremy among a group of kids at the arcade. He'd grown since the last time I'd seen him, stretched out, his features more defined, looking more and more like Nathan at his age. I headed toward him, but was stopped by Pamela's booming voice. "Walter, you're here at last!" She floated toward me, dressed in a perfectly tailored ensemble that looked too sophisticated for a children's party. An air kiss that barely touched my cheek exuded the scent of expensive perfume. "Thank you for being able to come," she continued with a rehearsed smile. "Jeremy will be so happy." "Oh, what did you bring?" "A telescope," I said. "The same one I'd given Nathan when he was the same age." Her smile twitched a little. "How sweet. I'll have it put with the rest of the gifts." She held out her hand, but I shook my head. "I'd like to give it to Jeremy myself." "Sure, sure." Her tone turned condescending. "Only right now he's busy with his friends, and the magician's show is about to start. Maybe later, when we're cutting the cake." I nodded, realizing it was useless to argue. Pamela quickly left to give some orders to the hired staff. Left alone, I found a vacant table off to the side and sat down, placing the gift next to me. The festivities unfolded around me like a well-choreographed performance. Pamela was snapping pictures on her phone, Nathan was discussing business with the guests, and the kids were squealing with delight at the rides. No one seemed to notice my presence. An hour later, the magician appeared, and all the kids gathered around a small stage. I watched Jeremy. He was laughing and applauding, but he had the same calculating look in his eyes as his father. He seemed older than his years, like a small adult in children's clothes. After the performance, the games began. Nathan participated actively, showing the others what a wonderful father he was. Pamela's camera worked nonstop, capturing every moment for their perfect social profiles. I was still sitting alone when Jeremy approached me. He stopped in front of me, eyeing me with mild curiosity. "Hi, Grandpa," he said politely but without much warmth. "Happy birthday, Jeremy," I smiled, feeling awkward. "You've grown since the last time I saw you." He nodded, shifting his gaze to the box. "Is this for me?" "Yes." I held out the gift to him. "It's a telescope. When your father was your age, I gave him one, just like it. We used to watch the stars a lot." Jeremy accepted the box and carefully unwrapped it. His face showed neither disappointment nor delight, only polite interest. "Thank you," he said, looking at the telescope. "I'll put it with the other gifts." He walked away, leaving me with a sense of missed opportunity. I wanted to tell him the history of the telescope, to explain how to adjust the focus, to show him how to find planets and constellations. But the moment was lost. Soon it was time to cut the cake, a tiered culinary masterpiece decorated with figures made of mastic. Everyone gathered around the festive table, singing congratulations, taking pictures. I stood behind everyone, watching this performance. After the cake, the guests wandered around the park. I noticed that Nathan was having a lively discussion with one of his business partners, so I decided to approach him. Real estate investments on the coast are the most promising right now, Nathan said, not noticing my approach. Pamela and I had already looked at a villa in a gated community. Of course, we had to take out a loan, but the status is worth it. When he saw me, he cut the conversation short. Dad, do you need something? I just wanted to talk, I answered. We hardly ever talk to each other. It's not a good time, he sounded annoyed. We're discussing important matters. Don't worry, Mr. Kingsley, his companion interjected. We'll have more time for discussion. Talk to your father. The man nodded politely and left us alone. Nathan looked at me with ill-concealed displeasure. What did you want? Just to see how you were doing, I tried to say calmly. We don't see each other that often. We're doing great. Business is growing. Jeremy's doing well in school. Pamela's opening a second gallery. What else do you want to know? I want to know about you, Nathan, not about your business or your material accomplishments. Something happened between us, especially after Mom died. So, let's not start this conversation again. He looked around, as if afraid that someone might hear us. It's my son's birthday. It's not the place or the time to get into an argument. When is the right time? I felt anger rising inside me. You always find an excuse to avoid a serious conversation. Nathan took a deep breath, clearly holding back his irritation. What do you want to hear? That I'm an ungrateful son? That I should spend more time with you? I have my own life, Dad. Career, family, commitments. I'm part of your family too, my voice trembled. At least it used to be. You've always been too demanding. His tone turned accusatory. All my life I've tried to live up to your expectations. Perfect grades, a prestigious university, the right career. And now that I'm finally living my life, you're not happy that I don't jump at your first call. Those words hit harder than I expected. Was this really how he saw our relationship? Like a burden he was finally free of? I never wanted to be a burden to you, I said quietly. I wanted to be a father you could be proud of. Is that why you skip my school plays for work? Forget parent-teacher conferences? The bitterness in his voice was genuine. You were too busy saving the world in your judge's chair to notice what was going on in your own home. These accusations were not new. We brought it up before, but always stopped halfway, unwilling to open old wounds. But now something had broken the dam. I've been doing the best I can, I countered. Siflakum. Yes, I worked hard, but it was all to give you and Mom a better life. At least Mom was there for me, Nathan said. She was supportive, interested in my life. All I heard from you was criticism and lectures about the importance of being principled and honest. Was I wrong? I asked, feeling his every word tearing at my heart. Those values shouldn't have been passed on to you. Nathan laughed, but there was no mirth in his laughter. Values? From a man who preached justice all his life, but couldn't spare an evening to have dinner with his family? You're talking about a double standard now. I remained silent, not knowing what to say. There was some truth in his words that I couldn't deny. I had indeed missed many important moments of his life, justifying myself by the importance of my work. But did that override everything else? Did that give him the right to distance himself, to forget I existed? What about now? I finally asked. I've been retired for 5 years now. What's stopping us from reconnecting? Nathan looked at me with a strange expression, a mixture of pity and annoyance. It's been too long, Dad. We've become strangers. I have my own life, my own priorities. And you're stuck in the past, clinging to something that no longer exists. At that moment, Pamela came over to us, her smile not touching her eyes. Darling, the photographer wants to take a family picture at the fountain. Everyone is already gathered. Nathan nodded to her and, without looking at me, said, I have to go. Stay if you want, but we'll probably be here a while longer. They left without even asking me to join the family photo. I was left standing alone, feeling invisible at this celebration of life. As I watched them pose, Nathan, Pamela, and Jeremy, smiling and flawless, as if from a promotional picture, I realized I'd been right in my misgivings. I wasn't a part of their lives. My presence here was a formality, a tribute to social expectations, nothing more. The decision came suddenly. I won't impose anymore. If Nathan thinks we've become strangers, well, maybe he's right. You can't make a person love you or even respect you, even if that person is your own son. I quietly left the party without saying goodbye. No one noticed my departure, which only confirmed the correctness of my decision. I sat in my car for a long time in the parking lot, gathering my thoughts before driving home. The conversation with Nathan had left a bitter residue and a pang of emptiness in my chest. As I started the engine, I caught myself thinking that this was exactly what I'd been dreading all week. Not the ignoring, not the coldness, but this conversation that finally set the record straight. My son no longer needed me. Perhaps he never had since he'd grown up and left my care. The drive home seemed endless. I turned on the radio to drown out the heavy thoughts. But even the music couldn't distract me from the simmering emotions. Resentment, anger, frustration, guilt, all mixed into a toxic cocktail that ate away at my soul. How could he say I was stuck in the past? Is the desire to maintain family ties a clinging to the past? Is the desire to know my grandchild the whim of an old man out of his mind? The traffic on the road was heavy, a Saturday afternoon gathering all the suburbanites on the coastal highways. I was tapping my fingers irritably on the steering wheel when suddenly I felt a strange sensation in my chest. A slight pressure at first, then it began to build, turning into a dull, clenching pain. Must be nerves, I thought, trying to breathe deeply. But the pain didn't go away. On the contrary, it grew, spreading to my left shoulder and arm. Nausea and cold sweat broke out on my forehead. A heart attack. I recognized the symptoms the cardiologist had warned me about. Stay calm, I reminded myself, pulling over to the side of the road. Find a phone and call for help. I stopped the car and reached for my cell phone, but my hand wouldn't listen. The pain became unbearable, like someone was clenching my heart in a fist. My breathing became ragged, and black spots swam in front of my eyes. Not now, a panicked thought flashed through my mind. Not like this. The last thing I remembered was my fingers frantically pressing the emergency button, and Nathan's words echoed in my head. You're stuck in the past, clinging to something that's no longer there. Then the world around me went dark, and I fell into a void. The bright light of the hospital lamps blinded me as I regained consciousness. The ceiling floated in front of my eyes, and the monotonous beeping of medical equipment was in my ears. I tried to lift my arm, but found that I had IV tubes attached to it. "Oh, you're awake, Mr. Kingsley," a woman's voice came from my right. "Don't try to move, you need to rest." A middle-aged nurse with short brown hair checked the instruments and adjusted the pillow under my head. What? What happened? My voice sounded hoarse, like a stranger. "You had a heart attack," she said. "They found you in your car on the side of the road. Lucky for you, someone noticed you were sick and called an ambulance. You're now at St. Joseph's Hospital." The events slowly came back to mind. Jeremy's birthday, the unpleasant conversation with Nathan, the pain in my chest on the way home. I closed my eyes, trying to deal with the sudden dizziness. How long had I been here? Almost 24 hours. You were brought in last night. It's Sunday, 6 p.m., 24 hours. I've lost a whole day. I was worried no one knew what had happened to me. Not Lydia, not... Sure, my son, I said. I should tell my son. "Don't worry," the nurse said reassuringly. "We found the contacts in your phone and called your son yesterday. He said he would come as soon as he could." I nodded, feeling relieved. Despite our last conversation, Nathan was my son after all. Of course he'd come when he found out I was in the hospital. Who else? I didn't finish the question, but the nurse understood. "Henri, there was a woman, Lydia. She sat with you all morning, but she had to leave an hour ago. She promised she'd be back tomorrow." Lydia. I smiled, imagining how worried she was. She must have come as soon as she heard what had happened. "The doctor will see you soon," the nurse said. "In the meantime, try to get some rest." She adjusted my IV and walked out, leaving me alone with the beeping of the heart monitor and my own thoughts. I looked around. A typical hospital room, sterile white walls, minimal furniture. It was evening outside the window, the golden rays of the setting sun filtering through the blinds. My thoughts returned to the conversation with Nathan. His words still reverberated with pain. Maybe he was right. Maybe I really had gotten too distant from him during my active career years. But did that justify his current attitude toward me? The door opened, interrupting my musings. The doctor came in, a gray-haired man in a white coat with attentive eyes behind his glasses. Mr. Kingsley, I'm glad to see you've come to your senses. I'm Dr. Mitchell, cardiologist. He came to my bedside, quickly looked at the monitors and made some notes on a clipboard. How are you feeling? Like someone who's had a heart attack, I smiled weakly. Oh, no. Tired and broken. That's normal, he nodded. You had a moderate myocardial infarction. We've done the necessary procedures, and the situation has been stabilized. But you will need time to recover and possibly some lifestyle changes. For the next 20 minutes, he explained the details of my condition, listed the prescribed medications, and gave me recommendations. I listened attentively, but some of the information passed my consciousness. Too many terms, too many instructions. Do you have any questions? Dr. Mitchell asked after he finished his explanation. When can I go home? If there are no complications, 3 or 4 days. But you will need help. It will be difficult to manage on your own at first. Do you have someone who can take care of you? I thought about it. Nathan was out of the question, even if he wanted to help. His busy schedule and his attitude toward our communication wouldn't allow it. That left Lydia, but asking her to do that seemed like an abuse of kindness. Maybe, I said evasively. I'll think about it. The doctor nodded and left, leaving me to ponder the future. The evening faded into a night filled with restless sleep, punctuated by nurse checks and the discomfort of the hospital bed. Monday morning brought new exams and consultations. I asked the nurse if my son had come in, but she shook her head. No one but Lydia had visited me. By lunchtime, I felt well enough to use the phone the nurse pulled out of the bag with my things. I dialed Nathan's number. It took a long time, and just when I thought I was going to go to voicemail, he answered, Yes, Dad. Hi, Nathan. I tried to make my voice sound normal. I was just wondering if you'd gotten word that I was in the hospital. Yeah, I got the call. His tone was businesslike, unemotional. How are you feeling? Better than yesterday. The doctors say I'll be out in a few days. That's good. The pause lingered, awkward and heavy. Are you planning on coming? I finally asked, even though I already knew the answer. I wish I could, Dad, but I'm on a very tight schedule right now. We're closing an important deal, and the future of the company depends on it. Of course it does. Work always comes first. It was ironic. Now I was in the same situation Nathan had been in, waiting for my father to find time in his busy schedule. I understand, I said, though I didn't really understand. Maybe later? Yeah, sure, as soon as the deal is finalized. It should take a couple days. No more than that. We exchanged a few more phrases, empty, formal, and ended the conversation. I put the phone down and stared out the window. Outside the window was the bright blue Florida sky, so clear and serene that it was almost insulting in its indifference to human drama. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the door of the room opened and Lydia entered with a large bag in her hands. Her face lit up with a smile when she saw that I was awake. Mr. Kingsley, she exclaimed as she approached the bed. You don't know how glad I am that you are better. Lydia, I felt a warmth spread through my chest. Thank you for coming. How could I not? She put her bag on the chair. I was so worried. I got a call from the hospital when you weren't answering your phone. I rushed right over. But you were unconscious. She sat down next to me and took my hand. Her fingers were warm and surprisingly soothing. I brought you a home-cooked meal, she continued. Chicken broth, casserole, and applesauce. Hospital food is no good for a convalescent. You shouldn't have bothered. Stop it, she said sternly. You would have done the same for me. I didn't argue, knowing she was right. Over the years we'd known each other, we'd developed a special relationship, not just employer and assistant, but true friends. Was Nathan here? She asked, though I could see in her eyes that she already knew the answer. No, I shook my head. He's busy at work. He might be here in a couple days. Lydia pressed her lips together but didn't say anything. Instead, she started unpacking the food she'd brought, pulling out containers and a thermos. I talked to your doctor, she said in between. He said you'll need care after your discharge. Yes, he mentioned that. I'll take care of you, she said simply, as if it were a matter of course. Lydia, I can't ask you to do that. You have your own life, your own business. Mr. Kingsley, she looked at me with such determination that I was silent. You didn't ask. I'm making the offer, and I won't take no for an answer. You need help, and I can give it. It's as simple as that. There was so much confidence in her voice it seemed useless to argue. Plus, I was touched by her concern. After Nathan's coldness, Lydia's genuine concern was like a balm. "Thank you," I said softly. "I really appreciate it." She smiled and started to feed me homemade broth, which was a relief after the hospital food. We talked about everyday things, the weather, the news, her cat, which had torn up the couch upholstery again. Lydia carefully avoided mentioning Nathan, and I was grateful for that. As she got ready to leave, I felt a sudden sense of unease. The room suddenly seemed even emptier and more impersonal than before. Are you coming tomorrow?" I asked, hating myself for this addiction. "Of course," she squeezed my hand. "I'll come every day until you're discharged." She kept her promise. For the next 3 days, Lydia came twice a day, in the morning before work and in the evening afterward. She brought home-cooked meals, fresh magazines, my favorite books from home. She told funny stories, helped me with my walks down the hall when the doctors allowed me to get up, and just kept me company when I felt especially lonely. There were no calls or visits from Nathan. I tried to call him twice more, but both times went to voicemail. On the third day, I left a message letting him know I would be discharged soon, but there was no response. On Thursday, during evening rounds, a nurse who had not been on duty with me before entered the room. Young with bright red hair and freckles, she seemed too energetic for a hospital setting. "Mr. Kingsley, how are you feeling today?" she asked, checking the readings. "Much better, thank you," I replied. "Dr. Mitchell says I could be discharged tomorrow." "That's wonderful." She smiled as she made notes on my chart. "Your family must be very happy." I nodded uncertainly, not wanting to get into the details of my family relationships. "By the way," she said suddenly, as if remembering something, "I saw your son at the party at the Ocean Harbor Yacht Club on Tuesday night." I froze. Tuesday night, when I was lying here on an IV, fighting the effects of a heart attack. "Nah, are you sure it was my son?" "Oh yes," she nodded. "Nathan Kingsley, right? Tall in an expensive suit with a spectacular blonde. A friend of mine works at that club as an event planner. She said it was some kind of launch party for a new boat line. Very exclusive event." "Big deal," I remembered him saying. So that's what was more important than visiting my father in the hospital. Cocktails at a yacht launch. "Shouldn't have him. I'm sorry if I said something wrong." The nurse noticed the change in my face. No, it's okay." I tried to smile. "Thank you for the information." She nodded, finished checking, and walked out, leaving me alone with my new discovery. The pain of this betrayal was sharper than a heart attack. All this time, Nathan had been lying, making up excuses why he couldn't come. Lying to his father, who was in the hospital having a heart attack. I picked up my phone, intending to call him and tell him what I thought. But then I stopped, my finger hovering over the call button. What was the point? What would this call change? Would it make Nathan suddenly realize his mistake, repent, become a caring son? I don't think so. More likely, it would lead to a new round of mutual accusations and resentment. I put the phone away and closed my eyes. Inside, I was bitterly aware that my own son had preferred a social event to a visit to his sick father. But along with the bitterness came a strange relief. No more fooling myself, no more clinging to illusions. Now I knew exactly where I stood on Nathan's priority list. Friday morning, Lydia came to take me home. She brought clean clothes and helped me get ready while Dr. Mitchell gave me a final checkup and recommendations for further treatment. "You need rest, Mr. Kingsley," he said as he wrote prescriptions. "No stress, moderate exercise, strict diet. I've made an appointment for you to come back in 2 weeks for a checkup." I nodded, listening to his instructions, though my thoughts were far away. What I wanted most of all now was to return to my home, to familiar surroundings, away from hospital odors and the monotonous beeping of instruments. Discharge took almost 2 hours. Endless forms, instructions, paying bills. Finally, all the formalities were completed, and the nurse wheeled me in my wheelchair to the exit, where Lydia's car was waiting. "Home," I said with relief as we pulled out of the hospital parking lot. "Home," Lydia agreed, smiling. "And I took care of everything. The fridge is full of food, the house is cleaned, All your medications are organized by appointment time. You shouldn't have. Don't even get me started, she interrupted me. We've already discussed this. I will take care of you until you are fully recovered. She sounded so determined that I gave in. Maybe that's what I wanted deep down inside. Someone to take care of me, not to leave me alone during this difficult time. The drive took about 20 minutes. Finally, we pulled up to my house, a light blue one-story building in typical Florida style, with a small manicured garden and a veranda covered with bougainvillea. Lydia helped me out of the car and held my hand as we walked toward the house. Every step was difficult. I hadn't expected to be so weak. By the time we got to the front door, I was breathing heavily. You need to lie down right away, Lydia said as she opened the door. Inside, the house greeted us with the coolness of the air conditioner and the light scent of lemon. Lydia had obviously ventilated and cleaned everything while I was gone. I've prepared a guest bedroom for me, she said, helping me into my room. Shamawan. That way I'll be more comfortable watching over you at night if I need to. Lydia, that's too much, I shook my head. You can't live here. Only at first, she helped me sit on the bed. The doctor said that the first week is the most critical. Then when you're feeling better, I'll just come in during the day. I wanted to object, but fatigue came in waves, robbing me of the strength to argue. Lydia helped me change into home clothes and lie down, then brought me some water and pills. Rest, she said softly. I'll make dinner and wake you when it's ready. I closed my eyes, listening to her quietly leave the room. A strange feeling filled me, a mixture of gratitude, relief, and a pang of sadness. The woman who was merely a domestic helper was showing more care than my own son. Lydia, who wasn't related to me by blood, was there for me in my time of need, while Nathan preferred a social party. Tiredness took its toll, and I drifted off to sleep, the first truly restful sleep I'd had in days. I woke to a quiet knock at the door. Lydia had brought a tray of lunch. How are you feeling? She asked, helping me to sit up. Better, I answered, and it was true. Sleeping in my own bed was a relief. Thank you, Lydia, for everything. She smiled, setting the plates on the bedside table. Fresh vegetable soup, steamed lean meat, compote, all prepared with care and attention to my new dietary restrictions. Eat while it's hot, she said, and then rest. I'll be in the next room if you need anything. She left, and I looked at the food I had prepared and thought about the strange twist of fate. The man I was paying to work in the house was now showing more human warmth than my own son. Nathan hadn't even called to see if I'd been discharged. He didn't know how I'd gotten home, who was taking care of me, how I was feeling, and something told me he wouldn't ask. The 2 weeks of home recovery stretched slowly and monotonously. Each day was similar to the previous one. Morning medication, light breakfast, reading or watching TV, a short walk in the garden, lunch, afternoon nap, another walk, dinner, evening pills, sleep. Lydia was tirelessly by my side, making sure I took my medication on time, ate properly, and didn't overexert myself. By the end of the second week, I was feeling much better. My strength was gradually returning, and my dizziness and shortness of breath were almost gone. Dr. Mitchell examined me at the follow-up visit and was pleased with my progress. You're getting better faster than I expected, he said, listening to my heart. You're obviously being well taken care of. He cast an approving glance at Lydia, who was standing by the office door. I have a great nurse, I smiled. I'm not a nurse, I'm a friend, Lydia corrected me. But there was no reproach in her voice. Indeed, our relationship had changed over the weeks. The boundaries between employer and domestic helper had finally blurred, giving way to something deeper and more meaningful. We spent evenings talking, sharing memories, discussing books and movies. I learned about her childhood in small-town Georgia, her early marriage and the loss of her husband, her struggle to educate her son. She, in turn, listened to my stories of her legal career, of difficult cases and tough decisions. I still hadn't heard from Nathan. After I was discharged from the hospital, I called him once, leaving a message that I was home and feeling much better. There was no response. I didn't call again. Pride wouldn't allow me to impose. On Friday, 2.5 weeks after returning home, I sat on the veranda watching Lydia prune the roses in the garden. She had insisted on taking over that job as well, even though I assured her that the gardener who came once a week was doing a fine job. Working in the garden is soothing, she said. Besides, I need something to keep my hands busy while you rest. Looking at her, so caring and devoted, I made a decision that had been brewing in me for days. A decision that many would consider impulsive or even insane, but to me it was the only logical one. Waiting until Lydia finished with the roses and left to make dinner, I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't dialed in years. Howard Mercer, a familiar voice answered after the third ring. Howard, this is Walter Kingsley, I said. Walter? There was genuine surprise in his voice. How long it's been, how long it's been. How are you, old Seawolf? Howard Mercer was my law school classmate and remained a close friend throughout our careers. For the past 15 years, he has specialized in family law and wills, with a reputation as one of the best in that field in our county. Akri, not as well as I would have liked, I replied. Had a heart attack 3 weeks ago. Damn it, Walter, he exclaimed. Why am I only hearing about this now? You know how it is. I tried to turn it into a joke. I didn't want to worry anyone. Are you okay now? Do you need any help? I'm recovering, thank you. And I have help. I glanced at the kitchen window where Lydia's figure flashed by. But I need your professional advice about my will. Howard was silent for a second. I understand. His voice became serious. When would it be convenient for you to meet? Could you come to my house? The doctor doesn't recommend long-distance travel yet. Sure, how about tomorrow around 2 in the afternoon? Perfect. Thank you, Howard. We agreed on the details and I ended the call. The decision had been made. All that was left was to put it into legally correct form. And who better to help me with that than Howard? Over lunch, Lydia noticed a change in my mood. You look pensive, Mr. Kingsley. Is something the matter? I put down my fork and looked at her. I've invited an old friend over tomorrow afternoon, Howard Mercer, the lawyer. I need to discuss some legal matters with him. Oh, she nodded. I can prepare something special for his arrival. Don't worry about that, I smiled. Howard's not a gourmet. He'll be happy with just coffee and cookies. I spent the evening going through the papers in my office. The current will had been drawn up almost 6 years ago, shortly after Sylvia's death. It was very simple. All my assets, including my house, savings, and investments, went to Nathan. Small amounts went to charity and old friends, but the bulk of the inheritance went to my only son. It seemed natural at the time. Despite the strained relationship, he was my family, my blood, an extension of me in this world. But now, after everything that had happened, after his complete indifference to my condition, I realized that this blood bond was just a biological fact that had nothing to do with true family. Putting the paperwork aside, I pondered the upcoming changes. Wouldn't it look like revenge on Nathan? Would my decision be motivated by resentment and bitterness? I carefully analyzed my motives, as I had once analyzed the motives of the defendants in my judge's chair. No, I finally decided. This is not revenge. This is justice. Nathan had long ago distanced himself from me, choosing material possessions and social status over family ties. He came only when he needed something, and he hadn't even taken the time to visit me in the hospital, while Lydia was there for me every day, sacrificing her comfort and time for my well-being. Justice is what has always been my guiding principle, both in my professional life and in my personal life. And now justice required recognizing who really became my true family during these difficult times. The next day at exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the doorbell rang. Lydia opened the door, letting in Howard, a tall, gray-haired man with a neat beard and shrewd blue eyes. Walter, old boy, he exclaimed, hugging me tightly. You look better than I expected. All thanks to Lydia's care, I smiled, pointing to her. Ms. Hope, Howard bowed gallantly. Walter has already told me about your selfless help. It's admirable. I'm just doing what I think is right. Gentlemen, I've prepared coffee and snacks in the living room. If you need anything, I'll be in the kitchen. She left, leaving us alone. Howard and I went into the living room, where coffee and homemade cookies were already on the table. A fine woman, Howard said as we sat down. I can see why you look so good for a man who's had a heart attack. She's amazing, I agreed. I couldn't have done it without her. Howard sipped his coffee and pulled a notebook and pen out of his briefcase. So, you wanted to discuss the changes in the will? I nodded. Yes, the current version is out of date. I want to make significant adjustments. We spent the next hour discussing the details. I outlined my wishes. Most of my assets, including the house and major savings, were to go to Lydia. Nathan was to be left with only a small portion of the inheritance, enough to not seem like a total deprivation, but disproportionately less than he expected. Are you sure about this decision, Walter? Howard asked, writing down my wishes. Such a drastic change could be challenged in court. I'm of sound mind, I answered, and this is my conscious decision. If Nathan wants to contest the will, let him try, but I doubt he'll succeed. Howard tapped his pen on his notebook thoughtfully. I can have the documents ready within a week, but you'll have to sign them in front of a notary and witnesses. Not a problem, I nodded. When everything is ready, I'll come to your office. Okay. He made a few more notes. One more thing. Are you sure Lydia will accept such a gift? Some people might feel uncomfortable receiving such a significant inheritance. I wondered. That question hadn't occurred to me. Indeed, Lydia was a modest woman who never aspired to wealth. Perhaps she would be uncomfortable accepting such a gift. I will speak to her, I decided. But not now, when the time is right. Howard nodded. Wise decision. There was no point in disturbing her before the time was right. We finished discussing the details and Howard left. He shook my hand firmly in farewell. Take care of yourself, old boy, and know that I'm always here for you if you need help. After he left, I sat in the chair for a long time, thinking about the decision I had made. Was it the right one? Had I been guided by emotion instead of reason? But the more I thought about it, the more certain I became that the decision was not only emotional, but rational. Nathan had never needed my money. He had a successful career, a high income, and appeared to be financially independent. My inheritance would have been a nice bonus for him, additional capital for his investments, or a new yacht for his collection. Lydia, on the other hand, could really change her life with those funds. She could not worry about old age. She could travel, visit her son in London, maybe even move closer to him. She deserved this security and comfort after all her years of hard work. Besides, I knew she would take care of the house I loved so much. In Nathan's hands, it would likely have been sold or radically remodeled to suit modern trends. Lydia, on the other hand, appreciated its history and character as much as I did. These musings were interrupted by her appearance. Did your friend leave already? She asked as she entered the living room. I brought fresh coffee. Yes, we're done, I smiled, accepting the cup. Thank you. Everything okay with your legal matters? Yes, just updating some documents. I didn't go into details. Nothing urgent. She nodded without asking any more questions, another quality I appreciated in her. Lydia never meddled in my business, respecting my space and right to personal decisions. We spent the evening as usual, dinner, quiet conversation, TV. But my thoughts kept returning to the decision I'd made today. I imagined how Nathan would find out about the new will, perhaps after my death, perhaps sooner. His reaction would be predictable: anger, accusations of my inadequacy, maybe lawsuits. But it didn't bother me anymore. At night, when the house fell silent, I couldn't sleep. Memories filled my mind. Vivid, like stills from a movie. I remembered Sylvia, our first meeting at the fundraiser, her laughter that sounded like a bell, her wisdom and patience. Sylvia had always been the best part of me. She softened my straightforwardness, taught me to see nuance where I saw only black and white. She was the perfect mother for Nathan, loving but not blind to his flaws. Where did we go wrong in his parenting? Maybe I really was too immersive, too strict and demanding. Maybe we gave him too much material things without teaching him to appreciate the intangible. Or was it just his way, his choice, for which he was responsible? I remembered Nathan as a little boy, inquisitive, open, eager for my attention and approval. When and why did that change? In adolescence? In college? Or had it happened gradually, unbeknownst to both of us? Rolling over onto my other side, I reflected on the life twists and turns that had led me to today. Every choice, every decision led to certain consequences. If I had worked less and spent more time with my family, would our relationship with my son be different? If Sylvia were alive, would she be able to maintain the bond between us? These questions remained unanswered, lost in time like footprints in the sand after the tide. In the morning at breakfast, Lydia noticed my tired face. "Didn't you sleep well?" There was concern in her voice. "Just a lot of thinking," I admitted. "Sometimes the past doesn't rest." "I understand," she nodded. "It's hard for me to sleep too, when the memories come flooding back." We were silent, each with our own thoughts, but there was more understanding in that silence than in any other long conversation. "I got a letter from Peter," Lydia said at last, changing the subject. "He's going to come for Christmas." "That's wonderful." I was genuinely happy. "How long has it been since you've seen him?" "Almost 3 years," she said, a twinkle of sadness in her eyes. "That's too long." "He could stay with us," I suggested, not thinking about the meaning of the word us. "There's plenty of room in the house." "That's very kind of you, but I don't want you to be cramped. You'll be well enough for Christmas, and I'll be back to my regular schedule." That thought suddenly upset me. I had gotten so used to her constant presence that I couldn't imagine going back to my old lonely life. "You never embarrass me, Lydia," I said quietly. "On the contrary, your presence makes this house alive." She was embarrassed by the words, but smiled gratefully. "You mean a lot to me too, Mr. Kingsley. These last weeks have been special." At that moment, I almost decided to tell her about my new will, but something stopped me. It wasn't time yet. Talking like that could change the dynamic of our relationship. And right now, that's what I valued. Simple, sincere friendship without complications or commitment. Howard called 5 days later, telling me that the paperwork was ready. We arranged to meet at his office the next day. Lydia volunteered to drive me, even though I assured her I could drive myself. "No way," she said. Dr. Mitchell said not to drive for at least 2 more weeks." "I'll drive you, and wait as long as you need." Things went quickly and smoothly at Howard's office. I read the new will carefully, made sure all my wishes were taken into account, and signed it in the presence of a notary and 2 witnesses. "I'll keep a copy in my safe," Howard said, shaking my hand in farewell. "I suggest you keep the original in a safe place." "Thank you for everything," I said. I was relieved to know that the matter was resolved. On the way home, Lydia noticed a change in my mood. "You seem calmer," she said, "as if a weight had been lifted off your shoulders." "I am," I smiled. "Some decisions are hard to make, but once they're made, it's easier." She didn't ask, which I was grateful for. Instead, she offered, "The weather is beautiful. Why don't we stop by the beach? A little fresh sea air would do you good." The idea was tempting. I hadn't been to the beach since my heart attack, but I used to go there often, especially in the evenings to watch the sunset. "I'd love to," I agreed. We spent about an hour on the beach, sitting on a bench and watching the waves crash against the shore. Seagulls shrieked above, and the sun slowly slipped toward the horizon, coloring the sky and the sea with golden tones. "You know," I said, looking at the water, "life is a strange thing. You never know where the current will take you." "That's true," Lydia agreed. "Sometimes the most unexpected turns lead to the right places." We were silent for a moment, each absorbed in his own thoughts. Then she said quietly, "I'm sorry your son doesn't visit you, especially after what you've been through." "I've made my peace with it," I replied, wondering how true that was. "Nathan made his choice. He has his own life, his own priorities." "But you're his father," she sounded incomprehensible. "Sometimes blood ties aren't as strong as we used to think." I turned to her. "And sometimes a true family is formed not by blood, but by spirit." She looked at me for a long moment, as if trying to figure out the hidden meaning of my words. Then she said quietly, "You have become family to me, Mr. Kingsley. I hope you know that." "I do, Lydia." I covered her hand with mine. "And you've become family to me." We sat like that, in comfortable silence, until the sun disappeared over the horizon. Then we walked slowly to the car, not feeling the need to break the silence with words. On the way home, I reflected on my decision to change my will. I was now fully convinced that I had done the right thing. Lydia had earned this inheritance not only by her care in difficult times, but also by the simple human warmth with which she had filled my life. At home, nestled in a chair with a book, I mentally revisited my conversation with Howard again. "Are you sure about this decision?" he asked. Yes, I was sure. More than that, I felt it was the fairest decision I'd made in years. Fairness had always been my main guideline, and now it was showing me the way. Lydia had become my true family, my support, my comfort in difficult times, while Nathan, bound to me by blood ties, turned away when I needed him most. The will wasn't just a legal document, it was an acknowledgement of that truth, a formal confirmation of what I already knew in my heart. Lydia was family not by birthright, but by right of love and care. And that right was stronger than any biological ties. It had been almost 6 weeks since my heart attack, and life was slowly returning to normal. I was already able to perform most daily tasks on my own, although I was tiring faster than before. Lydia continued to come 5 days a week, but she no longer stayed overnight, which seemed like a reasonable compromise. I got the help I needed, but didn't feel completely helpless. That Thursday, I was sorting through the books in my office. Some of them I planned to donate to the local library. Others I wanted to organize by subject for easier reference. Lydia was in the kitchen preparing dinner, and the soft sounds of classical music were coming from the living room. The doorbell rang so suddenly that I flinched, dropping the book I was holding. We weren't expecting anyone, and usually visitors gave notice of their visit. I heard Lydia walk across the parlor to the front door, then muffled voices, and suddenly a surprised exclamation. "Mr. Kingsley," Lydia called out with an unusual formality in her voice. "You have visitors." I came out of the study, wondering who it could be, and froze with surprise. Nathan and Pamela were standing in the hallway. My son was dressed in an impeccable summer suit of light gray, and his wife in a fashionable pastel-colored dress. Both looked as if they were going to a social gathering, not to visit a sick relative. "Daddy," Nathan stepped forward with a wide smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You look great. We were so worried." I stood, stunned by their sudden appearance. Not a call or text from them in the 6 weeks since my heart attack. And suddenly, this sudden visit with a show of concern. "Nathan, Pamela," I finally said, trying to hide my surprise. "What a unexpected surprise. We were supposed to be here earlier." Pamela came over and lightly touched my cheek with an airy kiss, enveloping me in a cloud of expensive perfume. "But we had so many urgent things to do. You know how it is." Yes, I did. I knew all too well what urgent business meant to them. Anything but a visit to a sick father and father-in-law. "Come into the living room," I said, gesturing for them to come in. Lydia was just preparing dinner. "Oh, we're not hungry," Pamela said quickly, glancing at Lydia. "We had a snack on the way." I'll make tea anyway," Lydia said, and I could hear the restrained disapproval in her voice. "With cookies." She went into the kitchen, and we went into the living room. Nathan and Pamela sat next to each other on the couch, and I settled into my favorite chair across from them. There was an awkward pause, which Nathan was quick to break. "So, how are you feeling? The doctors say you are well?" "I'm recovering," I answered briefly. "I'm almost back to normal." "That's wonderful," Pamela exclaimed with exaggerated enthusiasm. "When we heard about your heart attack, we were shocked. Weren't we, darling?" Nathan nodded hastily. "Yes, of course. I wanted to come to the hospital, but this deal, you have no idea how stressful it was." I did. Especially the stressful yacht presentation at the club that the nurse told me about. "Don't worry," I smiled, trying not to make the smile look too strained. "Lydia took wonderful care of me. I didn't need anything." "Yes, your housekeeper seems to be very devoted," Pamela said with a touch of condescension. "That's nice of her." "She's my friend, not just my housekeeper," I corrected, unable to hide my irritation. "Tom, and yes, she was there for me every day when I needed help." My words hung in the air, the implicit accusation too obvious to ignore. Nathan and Pamela exchanged quick glances. "Dad," Nathan began conciliatorily, "we really wanted to come early. But you know how it is, work, commitments." "Of course," I interrupted. "Boat presentations don't wait." He blinked, clearly surprised. "Excuse me." "Never mind," I waved my hand. "So what brings you here today? I doubt my health is suddenly a priority for you." A quick exchange of glances again. Pamela leaned forward slightly. "Walter, we're really worried about you, especially after such a serious accident. You live alone, and we thought—" "I don't live alone," I corrected again. "One. Lydia is here 5 days a week, and I have a panic button for emergencies." "But that's not the same as having a family around," Nathan objected. We've talked about this a lot, and we think that maybe you should move closer to us. That was it. Now I was beginning to realize where the wind was blowing. Move? I acted surprised. Move where? Well, there are several options, Pamela began enthusiastically. They've built a great senior center not far from our house. Separate cottages, 24-hour medical care, recreational programs. Very high-end, and very high prices, I suppose, or what I clarified. Well, yes, it's not cheap, Nathan admitted, but you could sell this house. It's pretty big for one person, and the neighborhood has become very desirable. I think you'd get a very good price. Now the picture was finally becoming clear. Their sudden concern for my well-being had a very specific financial background. What will happen to the proceeds of the money after covering the costs of this magnificent complex? I asked bluntly. Pamela grimaced slightly as if with a toothache. Walter, this isn't about money. We're concerned about your safety and comfort. Of course, I nodded with an irony they chose not to notice. At that moment, Lydia entered the living room with a tray. She set down cups of tea and a plate of homemade cookies, then looked at me questioningly. Is there anything else you need, Mr. Kingsley? No, thank you, Lydia, I smiled at her. You can get back to your business. She nodded and walked out, but I noticed how carefully she looked at my guests. Lydia was too tactful to interfere, but I knew she intuitively sensed the tension in the room. So, I said, returning to the conversation, you're suggesting that I sell the house I've lived in for almost 20 years and move into an expensive senior complex because you're concerned about my well-being? Exactly, Nathan smiled, as if I'd finally realized something obvious. It would be better for everyone. You'll be in the care of professionals, closer to us, and this house, well, it's really too big for you alone. I sipped my tea, pondering my answer. Part of me wanted to openly say everything I thought about their sudden concern, but the other part, the judge in me, advised me to stay calm and gather information. Do you have a specific buyer for my house? I asked innocently. Nathan exchanged another quick glance with Pamela, and I realized I'd hit the mark. Well, actually, there are interested parties, he began cautiously. You know the Martins? They've been looking at properties in the area for a while, and when they heard about your situation— My situation? I interrupted. And how, may I ask, did they know about my situation? Nathan looked confused. I mentioned in the conversation that you'd had a heart attack and that maybe you should move to a place with nursing care. Purely theoretical. Purely theoretical, I repeated, feeling the anger boiling up inside me. And they had, of course, theoretically expressed interest in buying my house. Dad, you've got it all wrong. Nathan tried to salvage the situation. Shomakun, we were talking about you, about your health, and the subject of real estate came up by chance. Pamela hurried to support her husband. Walter, no one is rushing you into a decision. We just want you to be aware of the possibilities. After what happened, living alone in a house this big— I don't live alone, I reminded him for the third time. Lydia's here most of the time. But she's just a hired help, Pamela objected with slight disdain. We're your family. The words struck a nerve. Family. They only remembered that they were my family when they smelled a possible financial gain. You're right, I said, surprising them with my sudden agreement. You are my family, and that's why I find it strange that in the 6 weeks since my heart attack, you've never once taken the time to visit me. You never once called to check on my condition, and now you suddenly show up with plans to sell my house? Nathan turned pale. Dad, that's not fair. I had an emergency at work. At the yacht club? I asked innocently. He froze with his mouth open. Pamela quickly intervened. Walter, you misunderstand everything. We're really worried about you. And this house situation is just a coincidence. If you don't want to sell, no one's insisting. I'm glad to hear that, I nodded, because I'm not going anywhere. I'm comfortable here, and Lydia's taking excellent care of me. There was an awkward silence. Nathan was obviously frustrated with the way the conversation was progressing, and Pamela nervously rubbed the bracelet on her wrist. Finally, she changed the subject. Speaking of real estate, Nathan and I are thinking about buying a bigger house. Jeremy's growing up, and he needs more space, and our current house is getting a little cramped for our status. I chuckled inwardly. How gracefully she'd shifted the conversation from my refusal to sell the house to their need for new real estate. Have you found anything suitable? I asked, deciding to play along. Yes, there's a great place in Palm Beach, Nathan said, clearly excited by the change of subject. Summer. A three-story mansion overlooking the ocean, a swimming pool, and a dock for a yacht. It's a dream. It sounds expensive, I said. Well, yes, it's a big investment, Nathan admitted, but our financial advisors say it's a good investment. Real estate prices in that area are only going up. And you can afford it? I asked bluntly. Again, the awkward pause. Well, Nathan cleared his throat. At the moment, we'd have to stretch a bit. The market isn't in a good state right now. Some investments haven't lived up to expectations. So you're having financial difficulties? I clarified. Not difficulties, Pamela corrected quickly. Just a temporary lack of liquidity. Nathan is closing a big deal that should bring in a significant profit, but it will take a few months. I nodded, more and more convinced I'd guessed right. They were counting on the fact that after my heart attack, I'd decide to sell the house and move into a nursing home, and I'd probably give them the difference in price. And if not, well, my will hadn't changed since Sylvia's death, and they considered themselves heirs to my entire estate. I see, I said neutrally. And you were hoping I'd help with the down payment? Nathan looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. Dad, we're not asking you for money. We're just sharing our plans. Of course, I nodded. As a family. The awkwardness in the room had reached a climax. Pamela set the cup on the table and turned to Nathan. Honey, we have to go. I have a meeting with the designer at 4. Nathan stood up with obvious relief. Yes, we really have to go. Dad, we're glad you're getting better. Maybe next time we could discuss things in a more constructive way. Sure, I stood up too. Always good to see my family. They headed for the exit, and I walked them to the door. On the threshold, Pamela turned around. Walter, think about our offer. A house this big at your age, especially after a heart attack? I'll think about it, I promised without any intention of keeping my promise. When they left, I went back into the living room and sank into a chair, feeling a strange mixture of emotions. Anger, disappointment, bitterness, and strangely, relief. I knew for sure now that I had made the right decision in changing my will. Lydia appeared in the doorway, her face a look of concern. Are you all right, Mr. Kingsley? Yes, just family stuff, I sighed. Nothing serious. She nodded, but I could see that she didn't believe my calmness. They want you to sell the house? I grinned. News travels fast. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to eavesdrop, she said, embarrassed. It's just that, when I was passing by... It's all right, Lydia, I assured her. Yes, they're asking me to sell the house and move into an expensive senior center, allegedly out of concern for my health. And really, she asked, and I could hear the understanding in her voice. They actually need the money from the sale, I said bluntly. They appeared to have a temporary lack of liquidity, but big plans for a new mansion in Palm Beach. Lydia shook her head, but refrained from commenting. Instead, she asked, Will you be having dinner? I can cook something light. Yes, thank you. I was grateful for her change of subject. Something simple would be great. She left for the kitchen and I remained seated, thinking about Nathan and Pamela's visit. Their true motives were crystal clear now. They weren't concerned about my health or well-being. They were only interested in the financial gain they could make from my situation. Part of me wanted to call them and tell them everything I thought of them. The other part, wiser and calmer, realized it was pointless. They wouldn't see anything wrong with their behavior, wouldn't admit their selfishness and coldness. But now I had an advantage. I knew their true intentions, while they were unaware of my actions. They had no idea that I had already changed my will, that their plans for my inheritance were no longer valid. Let them build their air castles. Let them count on money they would never receive. I wasn't going to shatter their illusions, at least not now. The time for the truth would come. Dinner with Lydia passed in a relaxed, friendly atmosphere. We talked about everyday things. The movie we'd recently seen, the new book I'd started reading, her plans for the weekend. Nathan and Pamela weren't mentioned, as if their visit was an unpleasant dream best forgotten. After dinner, Lydia went home as usual. She lingered at the door. Are you sure you're going to be all right? After such an emotional day, absolutely, I assured her. Nathan's visit wasn't a surprise to me. I'd known for a long time that sooner or later they'd show up with their plans for my house and money. You don't seem upset, she remarked with slight surprise. You know, I thought for a moment, it's strange, but I really don't seem upset. Rather, I feel a sense of clarity. I now know exactly where I stand in their lives, and that, paradoxically, brings relief. Lydia nodded. Sometimes it's better to know the bitter truth than to live in a pleasant illusion. Exactly, I agreed. Good night, Lydia. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night, Mr. Kingsley. Call me if you need anything. She left and I went back into the living room and sat by the window, watching the dusk fade over my garden. Thoughts of Nathan and Pamela slowly receded, giving way to a calm acceptance of the situation. I thought about my life, about how strange it had turned out. I had once dreamed of a close-knit family, a son who would follow in my footsteps, grandchildren who would delight me with their successes. Instead, I got a self-serving son who cared only about his status and money, a daughter-in-law for whom I was only a source of potential profit, and a grandson who barely knew me. But on the other hand, fate gave me Lydia, a woman who was closer to me than my blood relatives. She took care of me not out of selfish motives, but out of sincere human warmth and friendship. Maybe that was the main lesson that life taught me on the slope of years. A real family is not always defined by blood ties. Sometimes the closest people come into our lives by chance, unconnected to us by any formal relationship. I pulled a small leather-bound book out of my pocket, my new will, which I'd picked up from Howard Mercer's office after the formalities had been completed. As I flipped through the document, I was once again convinced that I had made the right decision. Nathan and Pamela would probably be shocked when they learned the truth. They might try to contest the will, make up stories about my incapacity or that Lydia had manipulated me. But Howard had provided for all those possibilities. The will was impeccably drafted with the necessary medical evidence of my clear mind and solid memory. I tucked the document back into my pocket and looked at Sylvia's picture on the mantel. What would she say about my decision? Would she approve of it, or would she side with Nathan? Sylvia had always been kinder and more tolerant than me, always looking for excuses for her son's behavior. He's just young. He'll find his way. Give him time, were her favorite phrases. But even she, with her endless motherly love, was disappointed with his attitude in the last years of his life. I don't recognize him, Walter, she said shortly before his death. Where has that sensitive, intelligent boy we raised gone? I didn't know the answer then, didn't know it now. But I did know that Sylvia, for all her kindness, believed in justice. She would understand my decision, perhaps sadly, but she would understand. With a sigh, I rose and headed for the bedroom. Tomorrow was another day, and I felt as if something had changed after Nathan and Pamela's visit, as if the last thread that had bound me to my illusions of family had finally broken. But instead of bitterness and emptiness, I felt a strange release. It was as if the weight I'd been carrying all these years, the weight of unfulfilled hopes and disappointments, had finally fallen from my shoulders, allowing me to breathe. Nathan had made his choice years ago. Now I'd made mine, and for the first time in a long time, I was sure it was the right one. I thought long and hard about what to do. A week had passed since Nathan and Pamela's visit, and their true motives kept me in suspense. Part of me wanted to leave it alone, let them live in ignorance. But the other part of me, the part that always wanted truth and justice, demanded clarity. Thursday morning, I made my decision and called Howard Mercer. Howard, it's Walter. I'm sorry for the early call, but I want to set up a meeting with my son, and I need you to attend. We arranged a meeting for the next day, and I immediately dialed Nathan's number. Nathan, I would like to meet you tomorrow, I said bluntly, at my house at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Tomorrow? I'm on a pretty tight schedule. It's important. It's about the inheritance in my will. A pause. I could almost physically feel his mood changing. Good, he finally said with much more enthusiasm. At exactly 2 o'clock on Friday afternoon, Howard arrived, followed shortly afterward by Nathan. We were seated in the living room, me in my favorite chair, Nathan on the couch across from me, Howard in the chair by the window. Now, Nathan said, did you mention the will? Yes. Nathan, I've made significant changes to my will. Given your recent interest in my financial situation, I thought you should know about these changes. What changes? I exchanged a glance with Howard, who nodded silently, authorizing me to continue. I've decided to leave most of my property, including this house, to Lydia Hope. Nathan blinked as if he didn't understand. Lydia? Your housekeeper? His voice sounded incredulous. My friend, I corrected him. Hewan, the woman who'd been there for me through the hardest times, who nursed me back to health after my heart attack when you were too busy presenting yachts. The color rushed to his face. You can't be serious. No, Nathan, it's not a joke. Howard can confirm that the new will is completely legal. Howard nodded. All the documents are legally executed, with the necessary certificates of capacity for Mr. Kingsley. Nathan jumped to his feet, his face contorted with anger. This is absurd. You can't give everything to some hired woman. I can and I did, my voice remained calm. You'll get a certain amount, but the bulk of the property will go to Lydia. She manipulated you. She took advantage of your vulnerability. That's undue influence. Lydia knows nothing about the new will, I replied. It was entirely my decision. I'll challenge it in court, Nathan said threateningly. I'll prove that you were incapacitated. Howard calmly intervened. Mr. Kingsley underwent a full medical examination before making the will. 3 doctors confirmed his capacity. The signing process was videotaped. The chances of contesting it are minimal. Nathan looked from Howard to me. Why, Dad? Revenge? Because I didn't come to the hospital? Not out of revenge, Nathan. Justice. Lydia took care of me when I needed help. You only showed up when you smelled an opportunity for financial gain. That's not true. I was going through a critical period at work. And the yacht club party? Was that work too? I asked quietly. He froze. Who told you about that? It doesn't matter. The fact is, you chose cocktails over visiting your father after a heart attack. Nathan sank down on the couch. Is this about the money? Are you punishing me? It's not about the money, I shook my head. It's about who has really become my family. I'm your son. I am your flesh and blood. And this woman is a nobody. All right. She didn't ask for anything, and she doesn't know about the will, I repeated. Unlike you, she's never been interested in my money. You can't be that blind. She manipulated you. I shook my head. You judge others by yourself, Nathan. Not everyone measures relationships by money and status. And you judge me without understanding my life. I have a family. I have responsibilities. I never demanded much. My voice remained calm. I just wanted you to remember that I'm your father, not an ATM. Nathan laughed bitterly. What about you, Dad? Didn't you skip my school activities for work? Didn't you forget birthdays? I made mistakes, I admitted. I wasn't a perfect father, but everything I did was to provide for you and your mother. On a farm. And now you're taking that future away from Jeremy. His voice grew quiet. You're disinheriting your grandson. Jeremy, a boy who sees me once a year and barely knows my name? He's a child. Of course he's more interested in gadgets than an old telescope. It's not about the telescope, I sighed. It's about attitude. You're raising him with a focus on material things without understanding what's really important. Nathan shook his head, his face contorted. I'm not going to listen to criticism of my lifestyle, especially after you give everything to the housekeeper. The decision has been made, Nathan, and it's final. I invited you here out of respect, so that you could hear the truth from me personally. He clenched his fists. You'll regret this. I won't let a crook steal my inheritance. My lawyers will contact you. He stopped at the door and turned around. You know, Mom was right about you. She used to say you were selfish behind the mask of justice. I didn't believe her, but now I see she was right. Those words stabbed me right in the heart. Sylvia had never said anything like that. I knew that for sure. Get out, I said quietly, and don't you dare use your mother's name in your manipulations. Nathan grinned. I'll see you in court. The door slammed shut with such force that the glass shook. Howard left soon after, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The meeting I'd feared had taken place, and the outcome was predictable, a complete breakup. But in a strange way, I felt not only bitterness, but also liberation. It was as if the heavy shackles that had bound me for years had finally fallen. There was no longer any need to pretend that our relationship could be salvaged. In the evening, Lydia called, concerned about my condition. Her simple human concern warmed my soul. I assured her that everything was fine, and I would be happy to see her tomorrow as usual. I have turned 73 years old, and who knows how much time I still have left. But those remaining years I will live by my own rules, surrounded by people who truly care about me, not my possessions. Nathan was right about one thing. I made mistakes as a father. I spent too much time on my career, too little on my family. But you can't change the past, and it's pointless to torture yourself with regrets about things you can't undo. True family isn't always those you're related to by blood. Sometimes it's those who choose to be there for you when you need them. And in this new understanding of family, I finally found peace.